You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to Pop, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible.
You're listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. I am artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm game designer Branson Faustini, and together we get to talk to the people who make the world of fun.
And today our guest has made a lot of fun. Adam has been in the toy industry for 16 years after having stumbled into it by way of consumer electronics company that he founded in 2003. Or in 2014, he sold the business to PlayMonster. Subsequent to that, he founded Tinkeneer, which was a U.S.-based manufacturer of laser-cut wooden marble machines back in the dawn of STEM. He set up a laser cutting facility in the north of Boston and ran that for a couple of years, at which point PlayMonster also acquired the company, and at that time, Adam along with it. Adam spent about 5 years as the VP of new business there at PlayMonster and is currently going on about 2 years as Senior Vice President of Product Design and Innovation at FatBrain. Adam Hocherman, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Great intro.
Oh, well, it was all about you. And I know you and you're pretty great, so pretty easy.
Appreciate that.
But, really happy to have you. And Adam, I guess as a little bit of an intro, a lot of times you're not going by Adam, but these days I've been hearing you going by Hock a little bit. Have you been rebranded? What happened?
That's exactly what happened. I got rebranded when I made it to FatBrain Toys. So the short story is that I run the product development team at FatBrain, and one of the real veteran employees there is Adam Carson, who's the son of Mark and Karen Carson, who were the original founders of FatBrain Toys. So he obviously predates me by quite a bit. So when I arrived, immediately there was confusion, emails being sent to the wrong places and so forth. So by means of resolving this, we went with the nickname. And so the nickname existed for a very, very long time, generations. Every male in my family seems to adopt this nickname almost instantly. And as a kid, show up at a new summer camp, and overnight I was Hock. Show up at, whatever, fraternity, school event, instantaneous. So, it kind of falls off in your adult years, but that's been my family's nickname, my dad's nickname, my brother's nickname, presumably my grandfather's nickname, if they had nicknames back then. And so we utilized that nickname, and it's taken a long time to kind of get used to that in a professional context. But finally, after year and a half, I'm pretty comfortable with it, and I've started to use it more judiciously in my sort of general outward communications. Although legacy people like yourself, David, it gets a little confusing.
Well, from a professional standpoint, we are in the industry of play, so we can have a little bit of fun with it, right?
Yeah.
That's right. I'm going to unbutton one button here. For that.
Oh, yes.
So, what drew you to the toy and game industry?
Yeah, it didn't. It drew me. I didn't even know there was one. I think, which is a common story in the toy industry often. So the origin story is that to go back a little further, I graduated with my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering in 1997, and then I worked for what was called Accenture back then. No, it's called Accenture today. I worked for what was called Anderson Consulting in those days for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, a couple of guys came into the office that were working literally out of a bug-ridden basement underneath Mass Avenue, or right next to this underground subway, the T in Cambridge and outside of Boston. And these guys had this amazing aerial digital mapping technology I'd never seen before. Digital maps, pre-Google, it was a long time ago. And they were trying to sell this technology to Anderson Consulting, and that didn't work out. But I contacted these guys and said, that is super cool. This is kind of more the environment that I want to work in. Can I have a job? And ultimately, a position came available. This turned out to be 3 guys from MIT in a basement. And that got me into the software industry. And I did that between 1999 and around 2003. And we were, ultimately funded with a modest amount at that time, about $5 million from a kind of boutique venture capital firm. But the company grew up in the .com era, even though it wasn't a .com per se. We were building a municipal mapping system for governments. One of the very, very first software, ASP. We called it an ASP. Today it's just a subscription-based, web-based service, but back then it was novel. And building this system, whereas you could do it for free today with Google tools, was very difficult at the time. And, ultimately the company wasn't successful. And in 2003 or late 2002, it went out of business, and I was pretty burnt out on software at that time. So I went back to the well and said, I'd really like to get back to my roots as a mechanical engineer. I always enjoyed entrepreneurship. What can I do here? And I had this idea for the original consumer electronic product that I built, which was called the Never Late 7-Day Alarm Clock. My kids and I, we all still use them to this day. This was back in the days when people bought clock radios, and
there were
I had this idea.
no smartphones back then, right?
No, this well predated this smartphone. And incidentally, I still think there's a market for a retro return to this particular product, but I don't know if I have the stomach for getting back into the manufacturing of consumer electronic products. Happy where I am for the moment. But this item, what this product did was, when I was in college, I always had a schedule that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday class started at one time, and a Tuesday, Thursday class started at another time. And I was like, well, this is very irritating because, you have 1 or 2 alarms on your alarm clock. So I devised the 7-day alarm clock, and it was very simple premise. It had one setting for each day of the week, and you set it for whatever you were getting up that day. And I called it the Never Late, and that's what it was. And I sold this, couple of accounts got this product and this company off the ground. One of them was Think Geek. So Chris Mindell, who I'm still in touch with to this day, he was the buyer at Think Geek at that time. And he believed in this item. And I built a subsequent model of it, which I called the Executive for reasons I don't know to this day, but that's what it was called, a more sophisticated version of it. And those items did really well at Think Geek. And ultimately, I placed this product in Linens and Things. That was my first big mass account. An account, something I did. This was an anomaly. I didn't understand this industry. I didn't understand how to sell things. And at the time, I got through a personal contact, I got a meeting with the buyer at Linens and Things, and I pitched this product line to a relatively young buyer that was there, and he thought it was cool. And the next thing I knew, Linens and Things ordered 10,000 pieces. And so this was like, my first major order for this thing. And, importing it and all that, which is, at the back of all of our hands today, that was quite an adventure. And, so the other funny thing that happened was, we did a store trial before that. And it turned out that all the sort of local, all the trial stores were kind of all in the tri-state area, which is where I lived at the time. And, I ran around to some of these stores and I purchased a few of them thinking, in order for this to be successful, you must have to sell out like 4 or 6 of these a week or something like that. So, which of course, so
you're buying your own product to make sure it's selling.
Yeah. If you get 1 unit a door per week, by door, we mean a retail location, you're doing really well. So by walking into a few of these stores and buying 2 units, needless to say, I got the results back from the buyer and he was like, this thing's doing really well. We'll take 10,000. So, I have no idea what impact, if any, that had at the time, but I've always sort of believed unknowingly that I may have altered my own course by by buying 5 or 6 Never Lates. Who knows? Ultimately, the product was successful on its own legs, so that worked out well for everybody, and that's how I got into consumer electronics. So how does this lead to the toy industry? Well, what happened was I built a number of alarm clocks, and then I ran out of alarm clocks to build. So I was like, well, I've got this factory that builds clock-like things, and I've got retailers that sell, other things. How about kitchen timers? So I did a whole line of kitchen timers, a very high-end one that I called the Chef's Quad timer. So the innovation on this one was that it was a 4-burner stove timer, and it had a little LED icon for each burner on your stove, and you set a timer for the burner that you were cooking on. Still love that product to this day and use it. It was successful in a number of channels. It was big in Sur La Table for a while. And then one day I had the idea that I wanted to do something in the children's space, not knowing that, that might be considered a toy. And a friend of mine came to me with an idea, and we worked on this concept together, which became the OK to Wake light. So I didn't have children at the time. I wasn't married at the time. And in fact, actually, I just got a notification that the LLC for that company turned 20 years old this year. So, wow. It was a long time ago. And this individual said, hey, my kids are getting older, but when they were young, I had trouble with them running into the bedroom at 3:00 in the morning because they didn't have a sense of what time it was. And wouldn't it be neat if we had something that lit up at a time that the parent could program? I said, all right. Never heard of that problem, but that sounds cool to me. I took it a step further, and I built this children's clock that had a sort of a grow with me function. So it was a night light, and then it had this color changing capability, and then it had an analog display and a digital display, and it spoke. And so it was a time teaching clock, and I called it the Teach Me Time. And again, this was pre-social media, and what happened was this thing kind of took off, and back before there was Twitter and Facebook, we called it mommy blogs. And so it was like sort of a very rudimentary version of the same people on a different platform. And so this product got a lot of traction in the blogs. Mothers talking about how to solve issues that they were having with their baby or their children. And ultimately, this product was very successful, and it really started to take off. And then what happened was that the recession hit, and I had employees at that time and office space and infrastructure. And, I almost shut the company down on that day. It was about 2007 or 2008. I mean, whenever, the recession was kind of on the horizon, and I had made this terrible sales hire. It was very expensive. I quickly realized that was a big mistake. And, I fired that guy, and I said, I've had it. What happened right at that moment was that the product really started to blossom on Amazon. So this is pre-Amazon marketing services. This is sort of a day when you put a product online, you got some positive reviews, and the thing took on its own weight, took off organically on its own. So you didn't need the same kind of capital that you need today just sort of to be in the game. And I found that all of a sudden, operating as a one-person company, it was amazing what you could do. And, with Amazon coming along, I was able to really grow this business pretty substantially without any overhead. I was able to get out of my office lease at the time. And so I was basically working out of my apartment in Boston. I had, by that time I had met my wife. We lived together briefly before we got engaged. And that's how I got into the toy industry. So in 2008, I showed up at the toy fair for the very first time with this item in a 10x10 booth. This was actually predated this a little bit. So, my first toy fair was 2008 with this item. And, I learned sort of the ropes of what was going on in the toy industry by virtue of launching this singular product and going to toy fair that year. And, later on, what happened was, I grew the business over, a period of time. I mean, it was officially founded in 2003, and I sold it to Play Monster in 2014. So, the Teach Me Time product came along in, I guess, I must have been developing it in 2007, launched it in 2008, did a follow-up product called the OK to Wake clock, which was kind of like the Teach Me Time was the best. The OK to Wake was less expensive. It was the better. Those products are still on the market today. At least the OK to Wake is, so this product went over to Play Monster at the time that I sold the business.
Is that OK to Wake? Make sure, because I've got 4 kids, and it's like, get back in bed. It's like, is it do not leave your bed until this tells you can kind of clock?
It is, and it's so funny because I mean, this was just a sort of this very interesting behavioral analysis thing. Whereas, you were sort of empowering the child to do this because it was something that was easily achievable, and it really worked. And so as a result, the product got a lot of word of mouth, and it was successful in that, right? So, as you guys know, running a manufacturing company, or running a business is difficult. Running a manufacturing company is difficult. It was a small company, and I was doing a lot of importing, and it was just like a roll up your sleeves, like all hands on deck kind of environment, and a lot of it falls to the shoulders of the founder. And I was getting pretty fatigued. So what else I was noticing, and I did successfully predict this, and haven't successfully predicted a lot of things, but this one I really did. So between when I was writing the deck to sell this company in 2014, I went back and looked at, my sales figures and my relative sales to Amazon and other channels. And every year Amazon was taking another 10% of sort of the total pie. And in those days, it was very easy to work with Amazon. I had a direct line to the buyer and the planner. There were no chargebacks. There was no nothing. It was glorious because I had worked with the likes of Bed Bath & Beyond, and those guys were horribly difficult to work with, and this was like a real breath of fresh air. You don't hear too many people saying that about their experience working with Amazon today. Unfortunately, over time, they adapted all these things that is common to retail. But, I said to myself, you know what, this is going to be a problem because Amazon's going to be this like sort of singular monopoly giant, and they're going to get harder and harder to work with, or they're just going to, at the time, I actually thought that they were just going to sort of cut the seller channel off. Like I didn't predict that part. So that actually became sort of their platform for growth. But in my mind, I was thinking to myself, well, at some point in time, I'm sort of beholden to this channel. They're just going to say, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. And then all of a sudden the business dries up. So I got very nervous about this trend and set out to sell the business. And I did that in 2014 to PlayMonster. And so that's how I wound up at PlayMonster. And, that so began my corporate foray into kind of the real toy industry, because it is a very different experience working on sort of this side of the fence when you're interacting with people like David, who are kind of the core underpinning of the industry, and the other major players in the industry, versus when you're really an outsider trying to get a single product line off the ground. So those have been very different experiences.
That's a long road from mechanical engineer to the world of play.
I suppose so. And I certainly didn't predict it in answer to your question. I didn't seek it out, and it sort of came to me, and then you obviously the industry is here, and it really is a very unique and wonderful industry, and I'm glad to have found it.
And part of that blend of engineering and play, I remember looking at your Tinkeneer, Marlboro contraptions. And those were about as engineering as it could get. Maybe you could touch on that product a little bit.
Yeah. So the core product line at Tinkeneer was called Marblocity. So today you go on Amazon and there's hundreds and hundreds of laser cut wooden models, some of which are very sophisticated and very beautiful, most of which are built by Ukrainian companies. Because that's where the wood supply is, and there are good engineers out there. But at the time, there were two companies doing this, or starting this, literally within a month of one another, me and U-Gears, who within a month of one another launched our Kickstarter campaigns back in 2016. And the origins of this company was, after having run a consumer electronics company for a very long time, working, late nights, communicating with China, traveling back and forth to China, dealing with, irrevocable problems. If you build 5,000 units of something and there's an issue, it's very hard to resolve it compared to the software industry. And, I was very tired, and I had this sort of vision that, if I could eliminate some of these pain points, I'll do, I really enjoy STEM. I'll do something, in that space. I'll build the factory domestically, and that'll be very fun and sexy and easy. And, there won't be any of the things that I dislike about manufacturing a product overseas. And of course, as we all no, the grass is always greener. And, running your own manufacturing company is extraordinarily difficult, especially in America, which is not really set up for, boutique entrepreneurial manufacturing. And so that was kind of the major stumbling block that I ran into, which was that it was very, very hard to find people to work. Ultimately, the solve for this was kind of cool. So I built this facility in Beverly, Massachusetts, north of Boston, and I hired a guy named Ayush Tile, who was a Northeastern manufacturing master's student. And they had, as many people know, Northeastern has this cooperative program where they'll send a student out to work for a trimester, and then they go back to school to finish the degree. So, Ayush really made this business come alive because he was so passionate about operations. And so he sort of, and he knew how to build a factory from his studies. And he sort of ran the operation while I designed, and built the product. And, then the subsequent year, I hired another student in much the same way. Coincidentally, his name was also Ayush. We called him Ayush 2.0, and he still works for PlayMonster to this day, very successful, which is one of the great things that came out of that acquisition.
Well, he's a great engineer. I've worked with him. He's sharp. Yeah,
he is. So I really hit the jackpot with these two guys. So that solved some of the sort of higher level issues. There were two other types of people that I needed to hire. One was sort of a semi-skilled laborer who would run the lasering operation, like a floor manager type of person. That proved to be the hardest person to find. We solved the low-level assembly problem in the following way, which was great. So Beverly High School was right next door, and we would set up this operation where we would laser all day because lasering was the bottleneck. And then at 3:00, we had, 12 or 15 students that were in this pool, and they would just sign up for shifts, and they would come in from 3 to 5 or whatever and assemble. So, each day, 2, 3, 4, however many students we needed would come in and do the assembling. We'd effectively pack up these kits. It was sheets of wood, metal parts and ball bearings and things, book, all of which was supplied domestically, except for the wood, which came in from Ukraine. And, we would palletize these things up, and we were doing this all right out of this facility in Beverly. But it was a struggle because our economy is not really set up for, that kind of operation. So this came to a head maybe a year in. I had a video call with the guys that founded UGears at the time. Now, UGears has gone on, so far as I can tell, to be very successful. A lot of these other companies you've seen out there that doing the same stuff, Roker and stuff like that, as I understand it, those are like spin-offs from, engineers that have left UGears. And so there's been this whole sort of network of laser cut people out there. So through a translator, we're having this conversation, and he asked me he asked me through the translator, what does it cost you to hire a laser operator? And I said, well, we've been thinking about this, and it's like $18, $20 an hour in those days. And so he's having a conversation with the translator, and she comes back to me, and his answer is $2 an hour. So, between that and the fact that these guys were sitting on the wood supply, this was going to be a very difficult thing to, sustain long term. So coincidentally, around the time I launched the Kickstarter, about a week before I launched it in 2016, I showed it to the executive management at PlayMonster. And this was at a time when STEM was the hot thing. Everybody was looking for STEM. And I just walked through the door with their answer. And so they were like, we got to have that. Little did they know that I was very fatigued from all of this sort of, manufacturing trials and tribulations. So I was pretty anxious to hand this off. And that's what I did. So I sold the business. Ayush Tile went back to India. He had a family, he has a family manufacturing business out there. Hocherman, who David you're referring to, he came with me to PlayMonster along with some of my other employees. Krista Jakes is a name who's in the industry. She's been with me through American Innovative, Tinkeneer, onto PlayMonster, and she continues to reside there. So that was the sort of the first company that I left before she did, or that we did an exit together. And the Beverly High kids went on to do their things, and that's so that's how that happened. And I spent my 5 years at Playmonster, and now I'm at FatBrain.
Now at FatBrain, you're doing the inventor relations, but you've been doing inventor relations really more or less. I guess that's kind of how you and I got to know each other.
Yeah. So I took over that role from Lisa Wunneman, who was in marketing at Playmonster at the time. And, I learned, she introduced me to a lot of the players in the industry. And then ultimately, I cultivated these relationships over years, including yours, David. And, that's been, kind of one of the sort of most rewarding aspects of my, my existence in the toy industry. I guess that's a good segue to like how David and I met. So, at Playmonster, we, in those days we were doing, when Toy Fair was still at its regular time of year and it was winter, I call it the ice box. So we would rent this, this windowless white walled room in the basement of the Javits Center. And it was like 40 degrees in there, and run meetings there for 2 or 3 days. And David came in and, pitched a whole bunch of really interesting stuff, but this was in the early days of escape room games. And David had this super innovative concept, which I don't remember what you called it at the time, but ultimately it became the break-in line. So the defining mechanic of the game was that, unlike the escape room games of the time, and David, you'll have to help me out, but I assume that like exit existed at the time.
Instead of trying to escape the room, it was like the peeling back of the layers of an onion, and you were working your way, breaking into some sort of nugget in the middle of the game, all with like 3D cardboard components, storytelling. And we ended up teaming up with Nicholas Cravata and Rebecca Blue, who helped with story and puzzle making on that.
Yeah, so I think what you were underselling here is that escape room games at the time, and still today, and they're great, are largely like flat paper envelope clue based. And David brought this, 3-dimensional prototype, and it was a building, or I don't remember what the prototype was, but the idea was that it was a building, and then sort of after you solved a certain number of puzzles, you kind of opened it up, and then within the building there was rooms or other features and things like that. And then you open the next layer up, and so you're sort of navigating through this story in 3 dimensions. And, it was this game-changing variant on what people were doing in escape room games at the time. So, this was a sort of relatively difficult concept to understand, and I'm not sure that my Playmonster colleagues were sold on this. But I don't know if I was sort of stalking you, or I want to say we bumped into each other serendipitously on the show floor. I remember I was on the first floor, and I really wanted to do this game desperately, and so bumped into David, and I don't remember exactly what our conversation was, but we basically made a deal right there on the spot on the show floor.
And we were in the aisle. We were just walking after we had already met. I remember just running into you in the aisle, like in an intersection of a couple of booths.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So tongue in cheek that I was stalking you, but or was I? Maybe it wasn't all that accidental. No. So this was a sort of an accidental meeting, and I think it led to that deal. And subsequently, David can attest to, this was a very difficult game to develop, and we did a whole bunch of them, and we had international placements for this and mass market placements for this. The puzzling aspect. I remember I didn't know Nick and Rebecca at the time, and David was like, "Well, I've got this great team to do the puzzles," and I was thinking, we can do the puzzles. We can't do the puzzles. We could, but David, Rebecca, and Nick are very, very talented at this. It's a skill. And, they really specialize in this. And so the 3 of us plus, it's been so long. Who did the artwork?
Stephen Downer. He's a comic book artist that's done like Wonder Woman and Sonic, Superman, different art out there that I've known for a while. I really wanted him on the art.
Guy.
Yeah.
Really easy to work with. And so all of us worked together on this project. And it was this really fun and interesting project. So, anyway, that's sort of one example of this inventor relations interaction. But yeah, I spent a lot of my time at PlayMonster doing that. Interestingly, my other roles at PlayMonster involved a lot of legal and contract writing and writing all the licensing agreements and all that kind of stuff. I was not in charge of product development at PlayMonster. It was a big enough organization that these were two separate disciplines. I was part of the executive management team, and my day-to-day role, encompassed inventor relations. So ultimately, almost 5 years later to the day, I left PlayMonster and went over to FatBrain, and that it's a smaller company in personnel. It's a leaner company, not necessarily in revenue, but the role therefore, encompassed more hats. So at FatBrain, I run what we call the wholesale division, which is our sort of custom built product development. And so I've got a team there and one individual in China, and we do the product development. And as part of that, I am also the inventor relations person. So what's nice about this is that I no longer have to talk to product development about inventor relations, because it's one in the same department.
You're always talking to yourself now.
I do a lot of talking to myself. But it's a committee. It's a committee process after I've screened it, and I've really roped Raina Schenke, who's our associate brand manager, a young woman who's been in the toy industry for a couple of years now. She helps me, and she's got a good eye for product, very detail oriented. So she's really well suited for this role. So we do kind of the first line of defense, and then it rolls up to a committee at FatBrain, where we'll bring to the table kind of the best ideas that fit our wish list and our product line, our product goals, and then it's a committee process. And so that's where it gets a little thorny. And you hear about this a lot. The inventor community hears about this a lot, just listening to the Hidden Role podcast. Like, a lot of companies work this way. So part of the role of the inventor relations function is to sort of sell in the concepts that they're passionate about, much the way that I did in the break-in example. And so that's a piece of it. At FatBrain, given the sort of intimacy and size of that group, this is just works more like a lot of heads in a room, and we sort of pound away at it. We like to use the phrase, die on the hill. So if there's something that you're really passionate about, are you going to die on the hill for it? And every once in a while somebody does. And, historically some of those items have been successful, obviously, and some of them haven't. And so it's a very sort of, there isn't a lot of red tape. The buck stops in that room, and that makes the process relatively smooth.
I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on how the toy and game industry has evolved and changed over the last, decade.
It's a good question. I'll disclaim in saying that sort of my mainstream toy industry experience only dates back 7 years. So, prior to that, when I was still an entrepreneur, I was kind of living in this kind of lobe of the toy industry, not really understanding how these, what goes on the inside. But certainly in the 7 years that I've been in the toy industry, it's been kind of one change after another, beginning with, so if you date back to when I sold Tinkeneer and the Marvelocity product line to PlayMonster, that very next fall season, the big placement was Toys R Us. And, PlayMonster was a pretty scrappy company in those days as well. And the way we were going to merchandise this was to build in-store displays, which originally were requested to be dynamic operating displays, which I knew that sort of in mass at a place like Toys R Us was not going to work. What we settled for ultimately was, building up these sets and putting them into an acrylic case and putting it on shelf, all of which, we had to devise and ultimately sort of piecemeal paid the employees to build these things. Because, building some of these larger models, even for me, who could do this from memory, couple hour process is just a time intensive process. So we did all this, and, we got this account all set up, and, there were all kinds of trials and tribulations with working with a company like Toys R Us at the time, who then proceeded to go out of business almost immediately.
Small changes.
Yeah.
It's interesting with, because I know a lot of the stuff when you first were working on technology, it was sort of the introduction of, really internet and smartphones have come out, and just the rate at which things come at us as consumers. It's like, if we're not interested within 3 seconds, we swipe and we're looking at the next thing. Like, how is that speaking into the toy and game space? Like, how is that type of, I don't know if it's like this dopamine hit that we constantly need of something new. Like, what are you seeing in the toy and game space because of that cultural shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, David, I'm going to be looking to you to kind of chat about this as well, because you and I had a little pre-chat about this. I liked your term, which you called disposable innovation. And by that, you meant, kind of the product turn rate is so high today. Like, if you go back to the 80s when we were, first seeing mainstream games in the form of Trivial Pursuit or Pictionary, these were expensive purchases. They were high-end, high-quality items. The intent was that they would be on the market forever. That was the intent, because there wasn't so much of a precedent for it at the time. Today, I think we legitimately, if you were to ask most people in the industry what you think the time horizon is for any given item, I'll put it to you, David. What would you say that number is?
Oh gosh, I'd say it's 3 years unless you have a really big hit.
Exactly. So I was going to say 2 to 3 seasons, right? And that's a shame, because it takes just as long to develop an item that is going to last for 2 or 3 seasons as it does to develop an item that's going to last forever. And there are obviously counterexamples to these, but many of those have been on the market for 10 or 15 years. Today, there is, like, things are very trend based. I think the attention span of the consumers is low. Their willingness to spend is low. This is something I've talked about over the years. Finally it's changed since COVID. Like, I think the $19.99 is now $24.99. But for years and years and years, it was $19.99. And the problem was that, what cost $19.99 in 1990 still cost $19.99 in 2018, except that $19.99 in 2018 is now $30 in $1990. So you have to build the same sort of product, same quality, same level of play for, that much less. And that has resulted in items that, feel kind of cheap and feel kind of throwaway and aren't really, items that you're going to keep on your shelf or on your coffee table, or that you really want to keep around for years and years. The audience has changed a lot. I think, I was speaking with the Target Games buyer, and, he's a very bright guy. And he said, I'm losing my audience to Roblox. He was just, like, very frank about it. Like, I lose my audience to Roblox at like 5 or 6. So we've lost a big chunk of the audience by 5 or 6. And then we're losing a whole nother chunk of the audience, maybe a different part of the audience, right? Roblox is probably boys, to social media, cell phones, and, other distractions like that at, age 11, 12, 13, whatever it is. And so, they're kind of, in a way, there's fewer consumers for the same types of items that we were building, however many years ago. And at the same time, like, time is passing. Like, the toy industry has been in existence for hundreds of years. It is harder and harder to come up with new ideas. You saw this specifically in, like, the kids skill and action space, which, if you've noticed recently, has contracted down to almost nothing, and is not the juggernaut that it was pre-COVID. And part of the reason for that is that every kid skill and action game that I saw was exactly the same. It had a randomized, mechanized surprise, and it was packaged as a monster or a lizard or a truck or whatever it was, but it was the same game. So there wasn't really all that much innovation. There were breakout hits, that were different, but that particular category seems to have kind of run its course and needs a complete reinvention, or needs to be rested. And, maybe we'll come back to it. I mean, what's your take on it, guys?
Well, the quantity of ideas that are out there, I think it's, we're at a time where, like never before, people can get their idea out there. You've got the introduction of things like Kickstarter, the fact that just about every toy and game company has got somebody that handles inventor relations. And, how many thousands of product ideas do you look at every single year? It's got to be immense. And you extrapolate that across all of the companies, the amount of ideas and products are turning so fast. Some of them, within a matter of months, an idea to the shelf. It's really, there's been a pretty big flood, and I see that people have the tendency to buy, or a lot of the selling is going off of, hey, what's new, what's novel right now, and people want to buy whatever is new and novel, and they don't want to spend a lot for it because they know that in a couple of months they need something else new and novel to fill that void. Unlike a lot of the games, like back in the day, it's like, I'm going to invest in this, and every Thursday night we're going to get together and play this game for hours. It's very rarely are people on the repeat play. There's exceptions, obviously, in some communities.
It's true. Even most of my friends are, really kind of hardcore board gamers and stuff. And, you're talking about like the quality of manufacturing and things like that. Even when you're buying a $60 to $120 game at your local game store, you're still going to play it maybe one or two times, and then someone else is going to bring the next game that they want to play. It's always, even in those spaces, it's looking for like the next experience. Even though these games, I've seen games like at our local game store that have been on the shelf for 10 years, but I don't know anybody who's played them more than a couple times at their game nights. So
yeah, that's interesting, because the strategy, I was going to say, actually, so once we've eliminated 6-year-old boys and 12-year-old girls, what's kind of left in a segment that has been very successful actually is like the kidult space, adult gamer games, the Gen Con crowd. And that audience, as as you've just described, is much less price sensitive than the mass market audience. But the problem is, because of the other thing that David mentioned, the sort of barrier to entry to making a board game in particular is extraordinarily low. There are many, many good factories out there that will do this for very reasonable prices. And if you've got $20,000, to cover sort of a first print run and some basic, that's just a number I pulled out of the hat. But you don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars to form an LLC, set up, build a board game and kickstart it. As a result, there are thousands and thousands of games launched every year. It becomes very difficult to, as the consumer, it's almost like a kid in a candy shop. There's beautiful games. The artwork is terrific. The component quality is often very good. The gameplay is mixed. I play a lot of those games, and I come back to a few of them, but I have a lot of them. So, to your point, maybe that's just human nature, but certainly there's been some resilience in that sector, I think, because of the audience and the lack of price sensitivity there.
Well, I can see this forcing game innovators, game developers, companies to sort of level up, if you will. Like, rather than trying to be a little bit more of that white noise, they're going to want to stand out with something that is going to have standout art, looking for the unique gameplay, rather than just regurgitating sort of that same thing over and over again. Are you seeing some other trends like that are, with your finger on the pulse of innovation? Like, what do you see that's next?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because the antidote to this, people believe, is the new tech, right? And so we've seen this fail over and over again. I remember, like in the 2010s or whatever, suddenly the iPad was widely available, and there was an attempt to integrate gaming, play and the iPad. That didn't really work out really well, except in maybe one notable exception. And then, more recently, it's AI. So, the second that kind of ChatGPT hit the airwaves, I'm seeing, games with AI generated, not just games with AI generated imagery, which is its own separate conversation, about how you feel about, inventors utilizing those technologies, but literally trying to incorporate the technology into the gameplay. Actually, Pictionary did a pretty good job with this recently. I haven't played the game, but I don't know if you saw the latest kind of iteration of Pictionary. the idea behind it is that you're drawing something and then the AI is guessing what it is that you drew, which is kind of a clever spin on that, right? So they've done exactly what you described. They took a new technology, they applied it to an old play pattern, and they have a new game. But from an inventor standpoint, I saw a lot of concepts around, AI generated prompts, AI generated imagery. It's all a good idea. Ultimately, is it going to be very successful? I don't know. Once you have to bring a cell phone or an iPad into onto the table, I just sort of, to me, it's a buzzkill. Like, that's not why we play games, right? We talk about this, and I guess at some point it sounds kind of fuddy-duddy, but we gather around the table and we do this to get off the screens, to get out of our staring at our hands and our phones. And once you need that kind of technology, be it Alexa or whatever, none of it's really worked, because I don't think ultimately it's what gaming is all about. So the problem, David, is that then you're back to, all right, well, now we got to iterate around the same sort of constraints and parameters that we've been doing for decades and decades. And that becomes hard because of the quantity of product.
There's definitely the breakthroughs, though, that we've been seeing. Every once in a while, there's like a new code names or something that comes through and just sweeps across the entire world.
Yeah.
And so what sort of things are there certain aspects that you're looking for that you would die on the hill for as that inventor relations, like, oh, this has got it.
I've made a point of making our universe very narrow, because I'm a very, ex-engineer, very detail-oriented individual. So when you read the Fat Brain Toys wish list, it's a couple pages long, and it says, we're looking for this, we're looking for these price points, we're looking for that category, we're not looking for this, and the other thing. And so a lot of what we're not looking for are, large topics that people like to present, collectibles, certain categories of games, kids, plastic action games. It's not really what we're doing, things like that. And so then you wind up with kind of a narrower subset of kind of fat brain type items. And we're well known for infant toddler toys. We have a very distinctive color palette, a very distinctive aesthetic, a design language, but there are fewer inventors that focus on infant toddler than there are that focus on games. What happened during COVID is that everybody kind of shifted, the universe shifted to games. Games were hot, and the inventor community shifted heavily to games. So when I go to a pitch event today, and I track this because we use a portal system, 60% of the pitches are games. And sort of what I'm really looking for, I think, is that next new toy. We've done this relatively successfully this season with our Air Tubes product, which is a toy that's meant to emulate the Science Museum experience of the pneumatic tubes with the balls and the scarves. So we built a home version of this. It's quite an expensive product, but it's off to a really, really strong start. And that's, it's a sort of salt of the earth kind of toy, not difficult to understand, and nobody done it before. So, that kind of item is something that we're really looking for.
This has been just a good look into the innovation story of what it breaking into the toy and game industry or getting sucked in, and just some of the trials. Like, we're definitely seeing some new trials, every day when it comes to just trying to come up with new ideas, trying to get our ideas in front of the right people, have a product stand out, make something makeable. It's a lot to chew on, but we love this industry and can't help it, can we?
For sure. And, David, you're a good example of it, pushing out so much interesting product while theoretically it's not even your day job.
Got a couple day jobs. Yeah, day and night. Before we wrap up here, there's one thing we like to do, is we like to throw a couple of rapid fire questions at you.
That's right. We're going to roll the hidden roll die, or at least I'm going to roll it for you here.
In proxy.
Yes. And we'll see what questions you get. We're going to ask you 3 rapid fire questions.
And speaking of AI, we did throw, so we've got an episode recently here just on AI, and we threw our symbols at ChatGTP to see what kind of random questions we could throw at somebody. So we're going to see what type of questions you get back thanks to the computer brain.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
First roll.
The $sign. All right. With an unlimited vault of coins, which game world dimension would you like to travel for a game night?
Wow. Interesting. This is an AI generated question.
Oh, yeah.
So what era of games would I like to travel
What game dimension? Like, for instance, you love candy. Boom, you're going to live in the real Candyland for a night.
I thought you meant sort of in time. I was going to say, well, how about next season? Then I won't have to go through all the trouble of sourcing what I need. I think that there is a space for a very sort of engineering, steampunk-oriented sort of invention gadgety game, something steampunk. I think there's a great aesthetic there. I've thought about building something like this for a long time, but it would be extraordinarily expensive because there tends to be a lot of like machined brass and expensive materials.
Well, that gives you something to do for Halloween.
Right.
All right, let's roll.
Next question.
The dagger. If you were a superhero, what game would be your kryptonite?
I already know what that is, I guess. I'm not a video gamer to this day. And, the reason is that when I was a kid, a middle school kid, I played a lot of video games like everybody in those days. And I spent a lot of time on Zelda. And then I had a relapse when I was, so what happened is at the end of high school, there was this like sort of space sim game. I can't remember what it was called, but it was a good game. It was you had to build these horticultural satellites and things like that. And the save function broke on my PC and it was a beautiful day. And I remember playing this game for like 6 hours just because I gotta finish it. And when I finally finished it, the end sequence broke and I never got to see it anyway. And I sort of stumbled out of the house with my, rubbing my eyes. And on that day, I was like, I'm done with video games. I am never playing a video game again.
It broke you.
And that has been almost true with one exception. When I was in college, Myst came out. You guys remember Myst?
Oh, yeah.
Myst.
Yeah. And I sat down and I played that during winter break for like 2 weeks straight. I had the very same sensation when I was done. I should not have done that. So,
I feel like a bad person now.
yeah. That's why we're all in the analog game industry.
Yeah. Get off the screens. Yeah. All right, one more roll. Let's see. The lightning bolt. If in a future of flying cars and talking robots, what type of game do you think they will be obsessed with?
Wow.
I'm sorry, I don't make this stuff up.
I'm trying to remember what they were playing in Back to the Future because I feel like there was a scene when when this was prescient. I suppose it would be I think it would be some sort of medium to heavy strategy sort of Gen Con type game, but that took place with levitating components, like the componentry that we think of like, ooh, really nice wood component today is kind of what we're after. Now it'd be something like, well, that component doesn't float, so that's low end. Things that fly and that levitate or project holograms. That's sort of what we'll be doing. Same context, just more sophisticated visuals.
The integration of some sweet technology. Yeah, if I recall from Back to the Future, Marty McFly was playing a video game and he was doing some sort of shooting, and the kids came up like, "What? You've got to use your hands."
Right.
Hey, this has been great having you here on Hidden Roll, and just want to thank you for taking the time, giving us some great story and some great insights.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you both for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. And, it's so nice that you're doing this for the toy industry and you've made such an indelible stamp, both in this capacity, but also in the development of your toys and games. So thanks, David. You're one of my favorite people in the industry. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. Too kind. But I guess till next time.
Yeah.
I'm going to see you in a week.
Yeah. See if people play.
All right.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way you can support us is to share us with your favorite brains. Please thumbs up, leave a review, and follow Hidden Roll Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com for a monthly sneak peek at our upcoming content. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Our episodes are available on all major listening platforms, or if you'd like to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, send us an inquiry at hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. Or let us know on our social media. We love to hear your feedback and ideas. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.